everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today, it's kind of a blast in the past for me, but I'm really excited to have Benilda Samuels on the call with me. She is someone I've kind of watched from afar and really been interested in the work that she does. And just recently, I asked one of the previous guests, Jennifer Fairweather, to give me a referral for someone who might be really good for the month of February, who's a strong leader and led with heart. And she suggested Benilda. So welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So where are you right now, anyway, in your leadership journey?
It's a journey that I manage with intentionality, and then of course I can't control everything. So, where I am right now is really feeling as though the world is in a strange place as far as how we are relating to each other, and as far as how we're tolerating each other, and as far as how we're lifting up each other. And so I'm at a place where I have this real need to I would say to tackle social change from a different angle than the one that I have than the type of work that I've been doing, which is all connected to nonprofits and to health and to working with the underserved. I'm wondering, and this is truly wondering, if it's time for me to tackle more sort of like the root cause of things, of why things happen. So social justice, social change, disparities, those kinds of things. So I'm at this place where I'm actually wanting to continue to do the work of social change, but really thinking about it, wanting to give myself an opportunity to contribute to it from a different angle. I would also say that, after 25 years of being in this space, I am really at a place where a big part of what I believe is my work now is to really lift up those younger generations that are coming into the workforce and supporting them in their vision and in how they see creating solutions for people living in poverty. So I'm having a really good time doing a lot of mentoring with younger professionals and connecting them to issues and helping them with their own professional development.
Oh, that's awesome. So I think it's really interesting that, I always tell people that leadership's a journey, and we are in the places we're supposed to be for a reason. We have to go through, some of the challenges as a leader, or, again, it's like an evolution of who we are and how we lead and where we're supposed to be. And so basically the idea is that we are where we're supposed to be. And when people are kind of doubting their leadership, like why they are where they are, or should they even be leading, just knowing that it is a journey. Right.
Yes.
And as you describe it right now, it's really like you're evolving, and now you're at the place where you feel like you've done that work, you've given them the most you can in that role. Now it's time to go to another place. And I think that takes a lot of reflection and self-awareness about who you are to know that too.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely about knowing sort of yourself, right? And knowing when you've done your bit and just sort of also, reflecting on what's keeping you up at night, and what are you thinking about, and what, just sort of, it's really about where you are, and paying attention to that. I do think it's important to just listen to yourself, right?
Mm, mm. So where does your drive to lead come from? Because you've been doing in leadership roles for quite a while.
Yes.
Is there a place where that started from? Was it, something related to family? Was it, just who you are and you've always been that way since you were small? I'm just curious to know what your drive to lead comes from.
Well, I think a couple different places. I mean, I grew up in Panama, so I grew up in Latin America, and I grew up in a Caribbean household in Latin America. So there are often a lot of two cultures always sort of framing the things that I do. And my mother was a stay-at-home mother, but she was very civically involved. She built the church that I grew up in. I mean, literally, like went out, get the money, went out, got the permits, eventually the brick and mortar that's there. I mean, so she was also, in lots of different civic clubs, and I remember one in particular where she was the first female president of that civic organization. So you sort of watched and learn, right? What she's doing. But I also think that my drive to lead comes from having an opportunity to provide representation and a voice for those who are not always at the table where decisions are being made. That's really important to me, and that has been, I think my role, my entire career has been driven by wanting to make sure that I am positioned in a way that can support those who are living in poverty, support the decisions that are made about them, support the resources that go towards them, and all of that.
Wow, there's there's probably another reason why now I've realized why we've connected. So my husband is from Panama. His whole family.
Oh, wow.
His whole family is, and there's the St. Lucian background, so there's that whole.
Oh yeah.
So it's just so funny because when we talk to his brothers, their accent is very kind of like the Jamaican-y, that kind of accent is very, very thick. And I'm like, and so my husband doesn't have that accent. Of course, when he gets around them, he does it all start to come out.
Right.
But he doesn't have as much, but he speaks fluent Spanish. But then he gets around them, he starts to sound more like them. So it's just funny when you say that.
Yes, no kidding. Wow, yeah.
I know. So again, the world's small. I just said that. The other thing is, I've always said, so I went to law school and practiced for a couple of years, and I really just hated it. But one of the things I realized, and I have it to this day in the work that I do, is I feel called to be the voice for the voiceless. It's literally so my entire niche in the business I do, besides the speaking, but even with the speaking, it all derives from this idea of being the voice for the voices, voice for the employees. It ends up being for employees who don't get a chance to really be at that table, and the leaders in their lives are the ones that really change the experience for them, good or bad. They impact it in such a huge way. And so I feel that same calling, obviously from a different perspective, that exact same way you described it. So we have a lot in common.
Yes. It is very important to me because that's where change can happen, and I've seen it happen. And so, yeah.
Love it. So what would those who you lead, what would they say about your leadership style? How would they define it?
Well, and of course, there are people who experience work with me 10 years ago, and those people would say something totally different than the people
yes.
who I'm working with today, because I've grown and I've learned. So, but I think most of all, folks would say that I lead with a great deal of authenticity, and that is important to them, and that is useful to them, and that they love that. Most folks would say I always know where she's coming from. There's never a surprise. And I think most folks would say, and I hope they would, this is how I was, the leaders that I work with, this is how they've always treated me. I hope folks would say that I always felt like I came first. Me, the person, I always felt like I came first, and work and the goals of the organization and all of that comes second. Because to be perfectly truthful, that is how what I have experienced coming up in my career, working for folks who really cared about me and what was going on with me. And I would do anything for those people, anything professionally for those folks. So one thing that I've learned is that people come first, and I hope people would say that.
Mm. Well, that's exactly, why Jennifer sent you over, because that's what this Leadership of the Heart podcast is all about. And I have a book coming out based upon this podcast, actually, and some of the work I've done on the employee front. And it is about caring leadership. It really is about that. I feel like nothing else matters if we don't start with caring leadership first. And when we get to what that means, and then how that plays out, then all the other things you're talking about, the task, the project completion, deadlines, the timelines, all those things happen. But you don't get there if you don't have caring first. So I love that, the way you summarize it. I swear we're like sisters here, right? Mirror images.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I just love, that's the relationship that I build with my colleagues, right? It's not just about work. There's always a personal relationship. I now, in my 50s, work with very, young women who are just having, babies and starting their families. And, and I'll have a 21-year-old next, at the end of this week. Right. And so when people call me and say, can I work from home because I have this issue with the baby and they got kicked out of daycare or daycare closed because it was snowing or whatever it is, right? To me, I get it. I completely get it. And there's no reason to add to that stress, which, if it will take over. Will take over a person's spirit and their attitude and their brain, and so I really tend to those things, and love it because I know that I've been there and I know that things have changed and for me, and so I tell them that too all the time. I'm like, it isn't always going to be like juggling 10 things at once when you have little kids. It's not always going to be that way. And you can do both. Women can do both, and they should, if they want to, try to do both.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, I have four children, ages 9 to 16. So the juggle is real for me and my husband. I say me and my husband and I, because it's both of us. I mean, I couldn't do it alone, right? And I'm thankful. Right. I know there are plenty who do it alone, and right? Too, but I appreciate and really appreciate and value the fact that you meet women like that, where they are, it is just them, and you're trying to make sure that you impact their lives too. So just in the work that you've done up to this point and all the other work you'll be doing, I know going forward. So that's good stuff. Great. So I'm curious to know, this is the point of the podcast where people always get like a little shifty. We're like, oh, I have to ask you. I ask everybody this. When was there a time when you were not the best leader, the most enlightened leader like you are right now? Think of a story, a time, a specific story, and be specific as you can. And then what did you do to come out of that time to be kind of, let's say 10 years ago, right, that more enlightened leader that you are today? And I'm not saying perfect leader, because none of us are perfect. I'm saying more enlightened. What did that look like? And then what did you do to come out of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly there have been times. I think that I will say that that when I worked at the City of Human Services, that was a very challenging position, and it was also very challenging times for the city and county. I remember that I was the public information officer, so the sort of the face and the spokesperson of the organization. And in the 2.5 years that I was there, I think that something like 16 children died in foster care. for various reasons. And there were a couple really high profile cases of those deaths. And I just think that I was in crisis mode for the entire 2.5 years, right? And so not giving myself the opportunity and also sort of leading others to give themselves the opportunity to just sort of pause a little bit, collect ourselves, and, collect our thoughts, was a leadership mistake. And I think of it as a leadership mistake because I think that if I'm responsible for communications and the public information and all of that what I do and how I behave is how others will what others will take on also. But we were in such a defensive and stressful mode that almost every day was about that. And when I think about that, and of course, that's what was happening was really, really a big situation. I mean, there is nothing you can do or say when a child has died, and it doesn't matter whether they were in foster care or they had their family with them or whatever. So I do feel as though that was a time when I could have led differently with a little bit more thought and less reaction, with a little bit more less defensive,ness, so where I could have brought people in and sort of held them closer, to get us through that period of time without really some of the heartache and some of the really challenging moments that as a team we had. I haven't really experienced that kind of stress again in a workplace, because that's a very unique situation. But I go back, I refer to those times a lot, when things get challenging, when things get stressful, where there isn't really a clear message or a clear answer. I think my approach is a little different. My approach is to hold people closer and to allow them to take a pause and some time to just breathe, so that they're not overwhelmed and overtaken by the actual situation, right?
I love that.
I had something not like that, but when I first started here, the David Oles, our founder, who's the founder of the model, a brilliant guy. This model is an evidence-based model, so it's constantly being reviewed, and it's constantly being tested by outside entities to see if it still works and all that. And so shortly after I started, the UK government had agreed that they would do a review of this program, and that took a while to get done, but the results came out, and in the UK, the results of that review revealed that Nurse-Family Partnership didn't had a flat effect in the UK, right? So it didn't improve the lives of women and their children. It didn't, negatively impact. It was just flat. And as you can imagine, for an evidence-based program, flat isn't acceptable.
Exactly.
Right, because you're spending money to do it.
Yes.
So if it's flat, why would you continue to spend money doing? And and for David Oles, the founder, that was a tough moment. Probably the first moment in his entire career where the thing that he had built with such care and such thought was being questioned. And I remember we went to dinner to a strategy session before the article came out, and I remember being better at sort of bringing down that stress level and helping him level with what was about to happen. And I did that by we had produced this calendar, this annual calendar that had 12 each month had a picture of a true, real NFP baby somewhere out in the United States, right? And they're all beautiful and very funny. And I remember taking that calendar with me and handing it to him and saying, no matter what happens tomorrow and what they say, I want you to remember, I want you to look at these 12 children and know that you have made their life better. And I want you to know that there's thousands of children who you've made their life better because you had the vision for something like this. And I think that, and I said, when you go into an interview, I want you to hang on to that, right? It doesn't matter what people say, right? First of all, you're not causing harm to anyone. And to these 12 children, you have made their life better. And to the thousands more here in the States, you have too. So I just want you to hang on to that. And you could just see his sort of able to take a breath, being able to reflect back and say to himself, this is true. I mean, I'll be criticized, but I have done some good here. So.
I have to rest into that for a minute. There's a couple things that stand out to me. One of them is this idea of holding them close. So I'd like for you to expound on that one. And then this idea of providing a space where others can breathe through anxiety, through stress, and become, maybe more resilient in that moment.
Yes.
And be able to just walk a smoother walk. So first, let's talk first about just like this idea and how you word it of holding them close. What does that mean for you?
Yeah. And I will say that I have learned to do that from being a mother. I will say that that's where I only have one child, and any challenges that he had, my reaction was always to sort of come closer to him and keep him closer to me. And I go back to the days when he was playing basketball in high school, and he had already said to himself before the game that he was going to have 20 points that game. And then, he had 6 at the end of the game, and then he just fell apart. Game. I mean, and that happened a lot because I had a kid who, for some reason, really, really wanted to always up his game in basketball. And of course, saying I never played anything. So saying things like, oh, honey, it's just a sport is just not going to work for somebody. It's that important, right? And I would just sit with him, literally on the floor. If he's crying or I would just sit next to him. And sometimes I wouldn't say anything. And sometimes I would help him think about what he could do next time, right? How many more hours can you practice outside? How many? And I have no idea if that was going to help or not. But that's what I mean by sit close. I mean, you just take time out to be with that person in the moment in which they are. And you don't always have to have a message. Sometimes I didn't, but just that they knew, that somebody was with them in their corner.
Yeah, I just did this talk at this, it was called Disrupt HR. And this is one of the things I talk about often is that managers don't have to have an agenda every time they sit with their people, but you just need to sit with them and see how they're doing and care about them in and out of work, and, have that just deep caring for them as humans. And so as you described that, because I know that was your child, but still, I bet you it just translates easily into the workplace for your team as well, right? It's that same thing. It's a message I want to tell people over and over again. We don't have to have an agenda. There doesn't have to be a task we have to assign. There's no project we have to have them on. But this idea of holding them close, sitting, being close, that type of idea, it's just so critical for them. If we want to keep them, we want them to actually perform on projects that we do put in front of them. We have to care first. We have to do these things you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There are times when I don't, if something major is happening to people, I mean, that is my focus, if there's a sick child or a sick parent, or, that is my focus. And people would say, I never, you can say, this whole thing about working from home and coming in late or leaving. I mean, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to those things when people are using it to stabilize their lives. I mean, I don't really pay attention to any of that. And I just say to people all the time, you do what you got to do and let me know how I can help. And I check in with them, just to make sure that they're still doing okay. And I mean, I don't really, people, I've had young women who, just having their first baby, and they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to take 3 months off. And then, at the end of month 2, they call and they say, oh, can I have 1 more month, please? I mean, all of that, what would I do with someone who wants to spend 1 more month with their new baby here in this office? I mean, he or she, they're going to be focused on their baby. So you might as well be there. I mean, I just make it for people because what's going on in your personal life is, can eat up what goes on in your work life like nobody's business.
Wow. That's just, and that idea of so how do you think that you actually, what did you personally do inside to change your response to external stressors that impacted the organization internally? So what you did for the founder when you were able to, when you reflect back on what you did, was it just the pain of everything you'd gone through before and that other job with human services that just was enough to just knock you into place and go, okay, if this happens again, I'm going to recognize the pattern and I'm going to change my course and I'm going to be the empowering person? Did you just make that decision and then it just happened and then it was just there?
Well, I don't think just made the decision. It definitely, I've definitely come to being that resource from my own experiences. Definitely. But I have realized that's, that things could have been better. I feel like at Human Services, boy, there were so many people who struggled those 2.5 years on a personal and professional level because of the challenge of this. And I just didn't, I wanted to do something about that struggle, so it wasn't one day I just decided I'm going to do this. I just said to myself, I could help people manage through these things better. And I've read, a lot about, resilience and, and grit to some extent, and try to apply that, here and there. Of course, some things are now easier for me because, so for instance, with all the young professionals that work with me, I went through some of those issues with kids and families and all of that 20 years ago. So I can truly say to them, this too shall pass, right?
Yes.
And I can truly say to them, oh, I have been there. So no harm, no foul. Take your time, right? I needed my time. Somebody gave me time. Go for it, right? So part of it is having lived it really helps.
And so I'm curious, like, so for those who haven't lived it, right? Well, how, what would you recommend for them to be able to, because I am a natural, like I'm an empath. So I feel people's feelings before they even say the words. I can give them the words that they're feeling. Like I'm just that person. It's good and it's not good. And it just, you know that is everything that's a strength is also a weakness to, take it to the extreme. But I mean, thinking about, to people, I always say, you really want to put yourself in the person's shoes, but it's not easy for a lot of people to do that. If it's not naturally who you are, to place yourself in the other person's shoes, to step out of yours and to look at yourself or look at the environment in their shoes, it's not easy that's not easy to be done. So I don't know, I'm curious to know, what's your recommendation for those who haven't been there? Let's say there are men who just never had that situation, or women who just never had that, either way, they just didn't live that experience. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that a fair amount of listening is critical, right? I think just being with the person, just listening, just taking that opportunity to sort of learn. Wow, this situation is new to me and I've never heard of such a thing, and just learning from what you're hearing, I think is helpful to people. Now, I will say that that on a personal level, I'm not like empathy. Like I had to practice that, and it came. I was put in a position to have to practice that with my son, when he was very little and growing up, because I come from this place of you tough it out, less whining is okay, is better, those kinds of things. And so that's how I grew up, and that was how automatically I would respond to things. But my son did change all of that. And I do remember someone who was helping me with parenting and all of that saying to me, so for now, for now, as you get started, you need to fake your empathy. Yes. And I was like, and she would say, and here are the 4 things that you can say back to someone so that they can think that you're being empathetic. And eventually you will become empathetic, right?
Ooh, I love that.
Develop that opportunity to do that, but at some point you just need a practical sort of little message points. And like I remember, this is totally love and logic, but I remember saying to my son, very, at a very young age, when he did something that was not right, saying, "Oh, that's a bummer. That's a bummer."
Yes.
I would have. Somebody taught me to say that. I never would have. That would not have been my reaction immediately.
Yes.
And over time, that's what I learned became sort of like how I do it now, right?
I always tell people I'm an emulator, or I'm from the beginning. I believe, like, this idea of fake the funk. So I would do that, and then I would develop my own style around it. So I might emulate someone who I respected, not copied, but emulated. There's 2 different things. And then I would just do my own spin, and then it would become like Heather's style or way. And this is just as a child. I'm the only child, so I did a lot of emulation. As having no siblings around me, I was emulating the adults. I would look at and so I think that's key. Ooh, that's critical. I think in the big picture of everything, I think that's critical. To be figuring out what are the words we might use, what are the tactical words we might use to get to the point. Because here's what I always say about leaders is, period, about anybody, is that people remember how you make them feel. And so if you can figure out the words that helps them feel the way you want them to feel, and over time, you'll see what that feeling does for you and for them, what it produces. And then you will get to the point where you use your own words, your own style to make them feel those ways again. And when they feel certain ways, good or bad, it produces actions on their part. So, for example, an employee, if they feel really supported and they feel really heard, they feel like they're growing, they're going to want to stay with you. they're going to want to stay with you. If they don't, they feel put down. They feel like your finger is on them, moving them around. They're not growing. Like all these things that are kind of the opposite, right? They're going to be like, how fast can I get out of here? Right. So those are the things I always like to highlight. And you're really, I think, expressing it quite well here. So, okay. So for the leaders who either might be struggling in their leadership or really just need a little bit of extra motivation this week to kind of get through the weeks and things, what might be two pearls of wisdom that you can leave them with today? Two things that they might want to think about or focus on and that can really improve their leadership.
Well, I mean, I have to tell you that I have learned the value of just pausing, of just pausing and taking a little time out and just being with yourself. And I think that's really important for leaders because when things are out of whack, with work and with, and with projects and with the things that you're trying to get accomplished, there's a possibility that that's out of whack because you're out of whack somehow, with internally. And so I just do a whole lot of reflection. I do a lot of, sitting in my backyard and looking out yonder. I mean, I really do. I just think we all need to know when things are out of whack with ourselves and find a way to get back into center in any way that we can. And that usually requires just pausing, taking a break, so that's something that I would definitely recommend that people include in as part of how they move forward.
And I think that's powerful. I mean, and I know I have to make myself do it. And I do feel much better when I'm able to do it. Like either go for the walk. Like I love spring and summer because I can just get out here. I can go for a walk and start to reflect, get that sunshine on me, helps me ponder some more. And when I'm coaching leaders, I tell them that often that, you're going to need to put 10 minutes in your calendar every day to just go out and walk amongst the trees and smell that air, and it's sometimes they're like, what, 10 minutes? I don't have 10 minutes. So it's like, okay, can you do 5 minutes? It's just like trying to figure out how you can break that down. But it is, that's how we gain that clarity.
Yes.
On the type of leader we are.
That this idea of going on a walk is, it seems simple, but it can be extremely re-energizing. I learned that my father, who just 2 months ago passed away, he was 93. I will say to you, in my worst days of my life, where I thought the world was gonna end, and that is what he would say to me. Honey, I just wrap up your baby, make sure he's warm, put him in his carriage, and go for a walk. Go for a walk and look up and look at the trees and feel the breeze and just go. And I started doing that when I was a young mother, and that made all the difference in the world. And I still do that today. Just go for a walk.
Well, so number one, I'm sorry for your loss with your father, boy, 93. That was a big life, a full life.
It was.
So what a blessing. And, but thank you too for coming on. I mean, coming on, number one, on short notice, coming on in February for Black History Month. I wanted to make sure I can honor some great leaders in our community. And you have honored me and us with just all this richness, this goodness here that you talked about. So for those who are listening, if you found great value in this, please make sure you share it with others in your network. And also, don't forget to write a review, because when you do that and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, you write the review, because there are a lot of leadership podcasts, it goes up in the algorithm and it helps other people find the show. So don't forget, if you're listening to Benilda and our conversation, to please do that. And this has been amazing. Thank you so much. After all these years, I'm glad we actually got to talk in this way.
Absolutely. Kudos to Jennifer for making that connection happen.
Oh, that was so smart.
Yes. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening to the show, to Leadership with Heart podcast. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.